Well, welcome everyone to our fourth and final winter webinar on salinity and potato production. I'm Carl Larsen from RMCG. Today we're going to be covering organic soil amendments, biologicals and biostimulants, and this is the fourth in a series. We've covered off on monitoring, on nutrition and hydrophobic soils earlier in the week. If you haven't been able to join us for those, please feel free to jump onto soilwealth.com.au to watch the recording and access those great fact sheets that's been put together by the project. We're joined again today by our panelists, Julie Finnigan from Servag down in Tasmania and Doris Blaesing from RMCG, along with Bruce Scott from Muir and Sons and Campbell's Fertilizers. So welcome to our panel. And thank you very much for everyone for joining us for this last session. The format is going to be pretty similar, a bit of a discussion through some slides and the chance for you to ask questions. So in your control panel on the side of your screen is a little question drop-down box. Feel free to type in any questions there. They'll come straight through to me and I can put them to our panel. We've also got a number of handouts for you to take away, a fact sheet that Julie has developed, which I'll let her talk about in more depth very shortly, plus a couple of other resources, including an organic soil amendments global scan and review, looking at some of the international research hot off the press. You'll see it's dated the 18th of June, which is in fact today. So without further ado, Julie, I'll hand over to you and we'll kick things off. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Carl, and welcome everybody. Thank you to all of those who have participated in our previous sessions, and welcome to all those new. So as Carl said, this is the fourth in a series, and it's all wrapping up salinity and potato work, focusing on the impact of groundwater quality on potato production, in particular in South Australia. But a lot of the things that we've been focusing on are easily useful and adaptable for people that are dealing with salinity in most areas of Australia, and we know it does affect a lot of our agricultural areas.
Especially in irrigated crops.
Absolutely, yep. So a very quick thank you. I've gone through this every time, but in particular, thank you very much to our funding bodies. Thank you very much to all of the growers who have opened up their farms to us. Thank you to all those who have participated in field work, on the ground monitoring, the likes of today, RMCG, Soil Wealth, AHR, etc., AusVeg, the Australian Government, Hort Innovation, as well with both the fresh and processing levy funds for this project. So just a little bit of a wrap up in terms of what we've talked about a little bit in terms of with this project. We know that South Australia is one of the largest producers of potatoes. More than 385,000 tonnes a year, and we know that a lot of the regions where a lot of the potatoes are produced, be it fresh or processing, is affected by salinity. So we've been aiming at trying to help identify the best ways to measure and monitor, the best ways to identify what salts are affecting our production and how we can manage those better in situ, the volume of salts that we apply to our soils. And you know, in particular, those hydrophobic sands, which we talked about on Tuesday, and the ability to actually wet the soil profile and get even moisture, even nutrients to those developing tubers. It's all very important. So today we're, I suppose the move is to say, okay, if we're looking at organic amendments and various biologicals and biostimulants, the reason why we're probably heading down that track is that there's a very, I suppose, large move from growers in particular to say they want to manage their soils more naturally. Most people, I think, want sustainable production, and we're getting consumer demand as well for more naturally produced products. So we're also, over the years, we've seen this massive move from very small tractors, or originally, when we were back in the day, it was the horse and cart, and we just get bigger and bigger machinery to make the soils do what we want. And we've been very smart in developing fertilizers and chemicals, again, to help provide the nutrition that's needed, or to suppress disease, etc. But at the end of the day, what we're seeing is chemical options are declining. We're seeing chemical resistance for a lot of things as well. Our soils are being bashed into submission. So this is some healthy red soils that aren't looking too healthy. So you combine all this with some of our hydrophobic sands and climatic stresses, and this is why we're heading down the track. So what else can we apply to our soils to help them, to our plants, to help them function better, and in particularly in these sandy areas. So organic soil amendments, biologicals and biostimulants, we're going to cover some of those today and actually look at, okay, well, what's on the market? What are they? What's the difference between a biological and a biostimulant? How do they work? And will it actually improve productivity in our saline environments? And, you know, are they going to be cost effective in the long run? So there's some of the things that we're going to be covering today. So first up, we're going to be looking at organic soil amendments, and in essence, in my view, it's almost the second best thing to cover crops. I always think growing cover crops the best. We get the natural root exudates and everything involved with it, but adding soil organic amendments are very good as well. So it's looking at the likes of compost teas, manures, which Doris will be covering in more detail here. So on that note, I'll hand over to Doris.
So I guess compost, a few years back, everybody thought was the home garden thing, but we certainly, especially in South Australia, have some large scale compost users and have seen very good results of using compost. Also, South Australia is very keen on actually using food waste and green waste and anything that can be composted to actually get to this circular economy we're talking about. So there's a lot of drivers behind using compost. Just have a real quick overview of what they are and what to look out for. So if you do the next one. So usually, you know, the sources up to animal manures, that's all in the compost. Biosolids are prescribed waste, and there are issues with using it willy-nilly everywhere, and also in vegetables. So I think we leave the biosolids to other people to deal with, because I wouldn't really want to apply them to vegetables. I mean, there are guidelines that it can be done safely, but we leave them out here for the moment.
Yeah.
One thing I've learned is that people call all kinds of things compost that are not compost. Compost are not rotting piles of organic matter or organic waste. They are actually completely decomposed. They are stable and hopefully reasonably mature, which means they smell good. They don't have big things, recognizable stuff in them, you know, onion peels or other weird things, and they definitely are pasteurized, which means weeds and any pathogens are not there, they're dead. And it's at least 6 weeks it takes, but under the right conditions. So if you just pile stuff up for 6 weeks, it's not going to work. No, there needs to be certain temperature, certain moisture, a certain aeration. So the good compost producers know how to do that and do that well.
It's quite a science and a recipe and certain conditions, isn't there?
Yeah. So why is it such good stuff? The main thing is it helps roots to grow better. I'm very friend of roots.
Yep.
And you can see the image there is actually a weed root system, and the weed is probably, you know, very small still, and it's got this massive root system and beautiful rhizosphere because of the organic matter in the soil. And if you can't grow it, like Julie likes to do with cover crops, the second best is to add it, which is in high value crops maybe a good option to do, because not always can you grow cover crops. And certainly we have found a lot of good results with crop resilience, with better soil life, diversity of soil life, and better water holding capacity, better nutrient management. The compost, if nutrients have not been added, they're actually not that high in nutrients. And I guess, Bruce, you would have that experience as well, don't you?
Yeah, a lot of people would try to use the numbers of the nutrients in the compost as part of their fertilizer program, but generally we just assume that the compost is being used for a soil improver and that the fertilizer program is coming from your other inputs.
Yes, and that makes sense. I mean, unless there is an enrichment of the compost, which makes things actually more complicated, it would be better to have just pure, stable, mature compost, and now it's mainly organic carbon. And from the work I've been involved in, it's the more mature and humified the compost is, the better it is for the crops. We get better results. But at least it has to be fully stabilized and pasteurized.
The smell that you're on about too, it's really quite distinctive, isn't it, when you get a good healthy
it actually smells very edible, I think.
That's right.
Yep. And you can see there's can be some bad problems, and the problems are really often because people don't compost the compost properly, or they buy compost that hasn't been composted properly, or get it for free, and people use it and then they have problems and ask a question and they have no analysis. So a good compost producers provides you with an analysis of a compost, and with the good, the bad and the ugly, so you know what's in it.
Exactly.
And that's very important. So next one, please.
So you're talking here too, Doris, about the amount of compost, not putting on too much. But even if you can only put on small amounts, it still persists over time, doesn't it? It's a longer term build-up.
It's a longer term build-up. You're not going to get the huge differences in a year. And I guess patience, I mean, if you take years to stuff a soil up, you have to have a bit of patience to fix it.
Improve it, exactly.
And compost is certainly...
Doris and Julie, around amount, we've just had a question come through from Richard. Thanks for that, Richard, on how much compost is too much at once when you say adding small bits at a time and having some patience.
I know that some people use 2 to 5 tons regularly with good effect. I also know people who,
Doris, just to clarify.
People who would like to, a bit more impatient, and they would put on 10 or 20. Well, I don't like the 20 ton, but 10 ton, which are huge amounts.
Depends on the soil a little bit too.
Depends on the soil, yes. And then wait a little bit before they put on the next lot. So I think a 10 ton application is still all right, especially on the sandy soil where you burn the organic matter, unfortunately, a lot all the time. The humified compost, I find you can go with lower rates because it has a better effect. So this might be more expensive, but when you need less and get a better effect, it's probably worth doing. And we had in some work in WA on the sandy soils, disease suppression. Actually, we're doing the DNA testing. I know from people in South Australia using compost after fumigation to reinvigorate the soil. That works quite well. And again, monitor to manage, I put that everywhere over the slides, is a really important aspect of using compost and really any nutrient and irrigation. If you don't monitor, you don't know what you're doing really.
Thanks for that.
Bruce, you can see the slide about the unbalanced nutrition. Have you got any comments to that?
Yeah, look, it can be an issue, particularly with manures, I guess, that people do sometimes use very large amounts of manure, whether it's from a cattle stocking or a chook shed. Big amounts can cause real problems. Often it's ammonia that's the problem, and also the big amounts can create some issues with drainage. So we're trying to use some of these products to improve the drainage and improve the soil physical characteristics, but if you're using too much of something, you may well clog up the works and slow down the drainage.
Yes.
I've seen that.
Yes, and also I think it's easier to do things in a more measured way, because then you can it's easier to adjust your fertilizer and irrigation program. If you do massive changes, you might get things wrong. So you might get nitrogen drawdown. You might, if you still irrigate the same, you might get waterlogging. It's actually a problem when people try compost and within a paddock that's irrigated for the other areas, that the composted area gets very wet. So it's that importance of balance. And not changing things too dramatically, but that's more. So it's like anything, little baby steps, and we lead to change. Actually, Carl, I thought it might be really interesting to see how many viewers have utilised compost.
Absolutely. No, great segue. Thanks, Julie. So we've got a poll up on your screen now asking, are you currently using composts? If you wanted to select either yes or no and click submit, those answers will come through to us, and we'll share them back with everyone just to get an idea of who is using what. So we've got about 60% of people voted, coming up to 3/4. I'll close that off pretty shortly and share back the results. So yeah, there we go. 57% of people, yes, currently using compost.
Oh, that's fantastic.
43% no, so that's
changed.
That's great.
It has changed a lot over the last few years, and I think it's a fantastic thing to see for soils and for also our recycling of organic waste.
Absolutely.
But there we come to the ugly, and I already mentioned the poorly composted materials. If you don't know what people put in, so a good compost producer will tell you whether it's food waste or green waste or where it actually comes from. And if it's not properly composted, that's when you get problems. If it's properly done, you don't expect any now. And the food safety issues again come from manures if they're used fresh, or biosolids. The thing is with manures, actually, there's quite a bit of work done in the Northern Hemisphere because of the feedlots, and manures used composted have much better effects on soils than manures used fresh. Yeah. So that's actually a good reason. And they also now, obviously, in Europe, use a lot of manures for biogas production. So the biogas production actually, apart from producing gas, has got a kind of compost and a digestate fertilizer brew coming out. So maybe we see more of that in the future as well.
Absolutely.
Nobody can see. I mean, every presentation has to have a table that nobody can read. But really, what it says is that if you use not well composted produce or manures, you can get problems with E. coli and Salmonella. And they're used as indicator. Usually, when they're high, there might be other things there as well.
So again, another thing to be cautious of.
And then again, the feedstock determines whether there are other things in there that you don't want. I don't think any good compost should have any plastic, glass, or rock in it. And people have had bad experiences. And when our compost producers have got gizmos that are quite fascinating to watch, they take this stuff out, and they're also better in separating in the transfer stations. So we're getting to much better compost quality.
That's fantastic. I do see here though, Doris, you've got soluble salts in there as well. So
yes.
When we're looking at applying compost in these saline situations, this is something we need to look at too, isn't it?
Yes, and I've seen people asking me, should I use this compost? And I said, well, if people don't give you test results for EC and soluble salts, I wouldn't recommend it because they might be lying to you. I mean, they might not, but I think you have to have a good, and there is actually an Australian standard for what should be tested in a compost.
Yep. So in theory, if you don't receive it, we can ask for it, and you should be able to receive an analysis of.
Oh yeah, I mean you wouldn't eat any slurry stuff that's strange, so I wouldn't put that on my crops. Yeah.
There you go.
So that's a little bit about the analysis and looking at nutrients. It is good to know if people put some wonderful things in what they were.
Yeah, what they are. So move on.
Move on to the last one, just to make sure. I think the relationship with the supplier is very important. To go there. I mean, I like to go there and just see where it comes from.
Yep.
Even for mineral fertilizers, they are produced to a strict standard. And compost should be as well, and a lot of people do it, but some people don't. And then there are people who do a good job without using the standard, but they take maybe longer times or with lower temperatures, but they still have to have the monitoring data.
Yep. So
I think
nice little website here. So in addition to the fact sheets and everything,
and the soil website,
there's a little URL here that people can
Compost
check
for
out
soils.
for more information. We've gone through that.
Yep, we've done that. Yep.
So flitting back, a little bit of a summary in that the soil organic amendments, the compost, they do help build your organic matter levels. But in particular, it really helps with improving your porosity and your water holding capacity of your soils. Now, the other side of it too is that within these saline environments, it can really help with your drainage as well, which can be really important. So at the end of the day, I think composts are really good. They're very beneficial to improving the sands in particular, in terms of soil structure, movement of nutrients, air, water through that soil environment. Things to consider though, as Doris said, we need to be careful of what salts are in our composts. Be cautious of potential heavy metals and pesticides. Again, most of them are fairly good, but check, ask for information. And you know, as Bruce also said, you know, they are not there to replace your fertiliser program. Maintain your fertiliser program, but be aware of the fact that your soil health and the way your soil functions will improve or be different.
Yes, and I've definitely know from people who really, some of them halve their fertiliser input because of the better root systems. So I mean, if the root systems can explore the soil better, you actually need less fertiliser and water. So it's not the nutrients in the compost, it's what the compost does to the root system and to the rhizosphere that makes a difference. So again, there's the monitoring important, because you need to know how much you can reduce your fertiliser inputs.
So we'll move on now to looking at the likes of biologicals and biostimulants. And Carl, perhaps we can ask our viewers here who has utilised either of those.
Absolutely. So we're really interested in your feedback, everyone on the line, if you've introduced biologicals and/or biostimulants into your system. Again, same drill as the last poll, just clicking an option there and hitting submit, and we'll share those results back with you shortly. So we've got just over half of people voted now, creeping up to 3/4. So I'll close that off now and share back the results. So almost a very similar split the other way to compost. So 42% yes and 58% no. So still reasonably high amount though, which is interesting to see, Julie.
Absolutely. To be honest, I thought it would be lower than that. So yeah, no, that's wonderful to hear. So in here, I was going to talk a little bit about biologicals and how they may differ from one another. So beneficial fungi, there are some products that have been around for a lot longer than others. But in terms of beneficial fungi, we've got our trichoderma and our mycorrhizal fungi, or VAN, which a lot of people know it as. So these are two totally different types of beneficial fungi that work for our plants in different ways. So the trichoderma actually grows within the rhizosphere. So that's a really fine area along that, covering the actual root, it helps to provide a barrier to fungal pathogens in that environment. It feeds on excess nutrients that's provided by the plant, so it's quite a beneficial relationship between the two. But it can also release enzymes, so I believe, that will help to attack some of the cell walls of pathogens as well. So that's how the trichoderma works, and there are various products that you can purchase that are trichoderma based. And I know of a number that do provide really good results in potato production based on some of the results that we've been pulling in. So mycorrhizae, they're slightly different. So mycorrhizal fungi are, they actually colonise within the root system. So it's a little bit hard to see, but they actually penetrate into the plant, and they also have an extensive hyphal system. I was going to say a root system.
Yeah, it is like a root system.
So it acts like a root system, but can be up to 50 times greater than the plant's actual root system. So in the right environment, it gives the plant the ability to access a lot more nutrients and water. So the other thing is they have these little bladders or vesicles that can fill up with moisture as well. So in times of climatic stress, it can actually help to provide the plant with a little bit more moisture as well. So two different types of beneficial fungi function in different ways, but they can both really assist with plant function. And then you've got the likes of your beneficial bacteria, and again, many products have been around for a while, and a lot more people are taking them up. So the likes of your Bacillus subtilis, it again colonises in the rhizosphere, and again forms a barrier to help prevent pathogens from entering the root system. You know, it's similar to the fungi. There's this beneficial relationship where they feed on excess nutrients, etc., you know, also help with some of that nutrition and moisture exchange. So a few different products there, and you know, they all function in different ways, but they can all assist with improving the function of your plant health.
And which is probably important to say, they assist, and you cannot have abuse.
That's right, yeah. They're not going to do everything.
Yeah, they're not going to be the silver bullet.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they give additional benefit. And we found actually together with Compost, that worked. It seemed to be better treatments when we tried using or establishing some of the beneficial biologicals.
And in theory, that makes sense, because if the environment's more conducive to these natural organisms, they're going to flourish more.
And have some food for
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so this is just a little bit of an example of a mycorrhizal trial that we did run in the Northern Adelaide Plains. So this was with fresh market potatoes, and it was using a product that had 4 different strains of mycorrhizal fungi in it and a humic acid, which helped them do their job, I suppose. So in this particular trial, there was a biostimulant underlying both the control and the mycorrhizae, but given that it underlied both, we can see here that you can still get an increase of about 6 tonne per hectare in yield through the assistance of this mycorrhizal fungi. So some of the greatest benefits in this trial were in that 70 to 250 gram size range. So it was pretty significant, but we also harvested some trials here in Tassie in a heavier soil, and again there was an average increase of about 3.5 tonne per hectare in that. So the average size of the tubers was about 10% greater across the board, and between 2 different trial sites it ranged from about 2.5 to 4.5 tonne per hectare increase, and that was straight biological with no biostimulants underneath it. So again, you know, I think it shows that we can implement the use of biologicals into our potato production systems and gain some benefits in yield increase. So biostimulants are slightly different again. So, and I probably won't do justice to the people that do the R&D behind it, but biostimulants are based on genomics, phenomics, and looking at aspects of plants that suffer extreme variation or levels of stress. So the likes of an algae that might be exposed in the sun for 12 hours and then waterlogged, you know, underwater for 12 hours a day. And the R&D that's based behind this is just phenomenal. So it's all organic compounds, substances, and they're aimed at assisting the plants do what they normally do better. But they may be targeting different areas of the plant. So it might help with root growth in a saline environment. It may help with recovering, or various products may help with recovering from heat stress or frost or chemical burn, for instance. So they're a totally different product to biologicals. They can assist with your plant function or heighten the ability of the plant function to be better in a stressed environment. So a little bit, you know, like the biologicals, etc. that we're talking about, you know, the market at the moment is huge and they're just expecting that to keep growing. So millions of dollars R&D going behind this, and again, it's a matter of having a look at what products are out there and asking questions, etc. So
yeah, ask people about data. Don't just believe it on somebody's a good salesperson.
No, that's right. Data's fantastic. It gives you that ability to make some decisions. So I could probably skip over this a little bit in that, you know, I've talked about the basics, but one of the products that we have looked at in terms of the biostimulant does really help improve rhizosphere efficiency, and as a straight biostimulant product, some of the data that's been yielded has shown anywhere between, say, 15 or 14% through to 30% increase. These are 4 different trials here with each of the bars. but each of them showed increase in yield. So 14 to 30%, that's a really good.
And when you can see that some, the 15% increase has also a much bigger yield to start with.
Yes.
So there are differences that you already have within the paddocks and what people do there, I would think. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. So the biostimulants will help improve rhizosphere efficiency, helps to gain a balanced growth, and it can help increase production. So a little bit of food for thought in terms of how we can start introducing the likes of biologicals and biostimulants into our programs, perhaps get those numbers up a little bit more to balance the compost, and together, it can be very beneficial across the board. So I know we've hit time, but in summary, do your own research. There are an amazing number of products out there. As we were talking about before we started, there are snake oils, but then obviously there are some really, really good products as well. And similar to the compost, if you can ask for data and see some good valid research behind it, you should know that these products are good value. Make sure you match your product to the function that you are aiming for. Don't expect them to be the silver bullet. They're not necessarily going to be the silver bullet, but when they're combined with aiming at helping to improve your soil health, looking at your soil nutrient levels, etc., they can be very, very beneficial to your productivity at the end of the day.
It's really important that you actually need the basis right, so you need a balanced nutrition, and you get additional benefits. So if you just use a biostimulant, but the plant is low in potassium or phosphorus, it's not going to do its job very well. Yeah.
So, measure your responses, look at your plant health, and I suppose, just be aware that every site will respond differently. What your neighbour gets won't necessarily be what you get, but have a try of some of these things, and, from what we're seeing, they can be very beneficial for potato production and assist with lifting yields in saline environments. Doris?
I think it's all from me.
All from you.
There might be time for a couple of questions. Yeah, Bruce,
or questions?
Yeah, I think you've covered it. I think the main thing is you're trying to improve the root zone or the rhizosphere, as you say, Julie, to get the best out of all that you're doing. So do the basics right, and then you get the added benefits from going down the path with the biostims and the biologicals. But if you're relying on them and you haven't done the other bits right, well, it's too big an ask.
Absolutely.
We've got a couple of questions coming through, which I would like to get to at least one, just given we are slightly over time. A question here just asking, under what conditions do you think you'll get the best response from biostimulants? Julie, we might start with you on that one. Or throw it open to the panel.
That could be a difficult question, in that sometimes we get the best response from the poorer soils, but I think in this case what we are saying is that I suppose it depends on the biostimulant and what it's aiming to do as well. So I think the healthier the soil, the more we can improve the soil, the better these products will assist.
You get additional benefit. I mean, if you have a soil that is waterlogged and compacted, there's no air in it, then no, that's
you need to get other basics right.
Yeah, you need to have air.
Yeah. So it's a hard question to answer. You need some basics to be okay.
Soil structure, definitely.
Yeah, to be able to get those results.
Julie, I think the best of the biostimulants are definitely targeted, as you said before. So you choose the biostimulant that has the best chance of doing the job you want it to do. So targeted products are really what you look for to get the best result.
Very true.
I mean, similar to if we choose to party every night and smoke and drink and have a Barocca in the morning, I don't think it's going to be really doing it.
No, not in the long term.
The perception of health, not actual health. That's a good point.
Right. Yeah. It's a bit like applying a Band-Aid versus looking at the cause of something. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, look, thank you everyone online for joining us. If this was your first one or you've attended all 4 in the series, that's been fantastic. So thanks for getting along. I will just mention too, the takeaways from today, if you do want a bit more detail, there's 5 handouts in the side panel there. Fact sheet 4 on organics, organic amendments, biostimulants and biologicals. There's also the organic soil amendment global scan from the soil wealth team, as well as a couple of salinity and sedicity fact sheets as well. But look, thank you very much to Julie, to Doris and to Bruce as well, to our panelists for providing those insights. I think crunching down those three, very technical topics into half an hour is always going to be a challenge, but I feel like we've been able to do it justice, which is great. So look, thank you to the panelists. And if you do want to watch the recording or access any other resources, head to soilwealth.com.au, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you.
See you. Bye-bye.